I'm pleased to have my co-host, partner in crime, I suppose, Nick Levett, back on the cast for a follow-up to our previous conversation about winning with parents. Nick, good to see you.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I'd like to say that we haven't committed any crimes other than our own extreme views on stuff, maybe.
Yeah, and perhaps a decade of almost criminal coaching before I saw the light.
Yeah, that's nicely put. I would probably agree in the sense of I didn't really coach previously. I might have been a football instructor or a technical information person, but I didn't really coach. So no, maybe something we can explore at another stage. But
yeah,
no, that's a good point, though. I like that.
Actually, you've probably piqued people's interest. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about today, tell me more. Why do you consider that you were a football instructor or technical person? What's the difference?
I guess I just didn't really know what I was doing. And you know, the kids that I was working with would get whatever was on my session plan, regardless of whether it was what they needed or not, because I'd written it, and you know, I had 15 minutes for this bit, and therefore 15 minutes I was going to move on to the next bit because it was meticulously planned. And it would have been me doing coaching to them, not necessarily a proper two-way, what I would now see as a coaching relationship with important stuff, I think. Yeah.
So what's the difference? What is a coaching relationship?
First of all, I've got a bit of a cough, so I'll warn people there now.
Okay, no worries.
Man, that's a massive question. I wasn't prepared for that one. We never discussed this one.
Hey, look, this is the talent equation. We put each other under pressure.
Yeah, because you know this is coming right back.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think ultimately for me it's about relationships, and certainly working in a team sport, there's a multitude of different relationships that I probably didn't consider from a understanding that individual perspective and the dynamic that they have within a group and with other coaches and physio, sports science, psych, all the kind of support that might be around them if they're working in a talent environment. And it's that interrelationship and kind of dynamic relationship that exists between all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
But equally how that changes from working with under 10s, under 11s as I did at a Category 1 academy for 6 years, to then if you're working with a group of teenagers, and the difference of just from a neuroscience, brain development perspective, and the influence of the peer group on a social dynamic and all of this kind of stuff, like the football stuff becomes largely irrelevant at times. If you don't understand that personal relationship people part, plus that kind of self-awareness about your own delivery. And then I think you layer the sport bit on top of that. So what's your view?
Well, yeah, I would agree with you. I think, in my coach education, I received information about the techniques of the sport and some of the tactics, albeit I don't think I received very much information about the tactics. And my focus for an awful long time was that imparting, or if you like, basically just trying to get individuals to be able to repeat those techniques, and also, you know, as I started to do more work with teams and all those sorts of stuff, essentially testing my own ideas around tactical approaches and trying to get teams to work within those tactical approaches. And basically, I reckon good 10, 15 years was me essentially just trying to get people into boxes. So, and it was either a technical box, do this, do that, do this in this situation, or it was a tactical box. This is our game plan. This is how we play. This is what we do. And our success is determined by how well we execute the predetermined game plan that I've devised. if we don't execute that predetermined game plan, which is, by the way, perfect, then we will lose, and it's your fault, you players. I then, through bitter experience, learned that actually coaching is, in my opinion, at least 70% about the individual and their individual motivations, their ability to learn, how they learn, the approaches that they adopt, their individual capabilities, and what have you. And it was once I understood that, and then I realised that I could have way more impact on the performance of a player in a 30-minute phone call when I was driving home from the session than I could in 30 sessions of activity. And once I got that, I started to begin to have success. But I hasten to add, I'd had absolutely no information provided to me from my governing body on that area. It was all either experientially learnt, or it was through reading or trying to solve problems by finding out information from whoever I could as to how I got better at that.
Right, we're going off piece now. That previous topic that we said when we talked about, we can forget. I'm interested. Right, so you said it was about technical repetition.
Yeah.
Now, some people would argue that's what you have to do. That's coaching? Technical repetition to get players to be able to perfect a technique and use it.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
If sport, in our cases, in invasion games we both play, we're both involved with, you propel the ball using your feet and I propel the ball using a stick.
Yeah. By the way, I know that I am prodding a bear when I asked that question.
Yeah, I could tell. Sit back and relax, buckle up.
Yeah, off you go, boy.
So if sport was like some other sports where, for example, let's say like gymnastics, where the name of the game is to essentially perform a movement with a degree of precision, and somebody comes along and goes, yes, that movement was precise according to the agreed definition of what that movement should look like. And the other movement that you've done wasn't quite as precise, and that's how you become either a winner or a loser, so to speak. If our respective games were like that, and you won games of football because somebody on the bench on the sideline or whoever, or a panel of judges, when that team plays a better game of football, they do their techniques better, then by all means, fire away. That's definitely the way to go. You want people just repeat. The problem is what's not the actual objective of the game. The objective of the game is there's some other people in the way, and they're going to do their level best to try and stop you from getting the object into the goal. That's what they're going to do. So you need to think about the things you need to do is work out how to get past them. Now, there might be techniques that help you do that, but the best way to learn them, according to certainly the scientific literature that I have been engaged with, increasingly a body of practitioner knowledge and my own experience, is to learn how to do that with those people there. So actually doing it without them, what you're learning to do a movement. But if you don't learn that movement with also the visual and the stimulation of another individual who is trying to stop you from doing that movement, you never learn the adaptability to be able, because it's not a perfect movement, it's actually an adapted movement. It will never be the same, well, hardly ever will it be the same from one moment to the next. You might do the same movement, broadly speaking, but there'll be tiny adaptations that you've had to do based on what the defender does. Now, if you never get that exposure, if all you do is learn a movement and then try and apply it in a context when there's all sorts of variability going on with loads and loads of different people having a go and trying to stop you and tackling and all these sorts of things, that skill won't translate. And if some of it does translate, it'll crumble under pressure, which is why you see this phrase revert to type. Whenever I hear a coach use that phrase, I think, do you realise what a damning admission that is on your coaching?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a story guy called Ian Renshaw told me. Ian is an English guy who works in Australia. His son actually is now playing cricket for Australia.
Saw that. Yeah.
And he was telling me about the Australian cricket team were going to play Sri Lanka at the kind of the peak of Muralitharan. So they were going over there to face Doosras and Googlies and all sorts of leg breaks that they'd never seen before. So what they did was they worked out all the kind of the spin rotations and all this kind of stuff, and then got all the batsmen in the nets before they went on tour, and they put the ball in the bowling machine and would send it down with the particular kind of spin that Muralitharan had to put on the ball. They went to Sri Lanka having had all of this practice facing all of these different balls from the bowling machine. Got there and he cleaned up. Because by putting the ball in the bowling machine and not facing a real opponent, you then missed all the vital cues and triggers of how you actually bowled the ball specifically. You know, the release position of the hands, the direction that the elbow was pointing on release, all that kind of cues and triggers you never get from the bowling machine. But they then also worked out that the kind of the timing of front foot movement, back foot movement, back swing, down swing, forward, everything was different facing a bowling machine to actually facing a real human being. So you're right, everything goes really well until you put the opposition in there. And then that technique that you've just worked suddenly can't be applied. And that was certainly an example from the cricket world.
I mean, some people think though that some argue though that unless you've got a base level of technique, you can't build upon it. How would you view that argument?
It depends on where and when you class. So, what is a base technique? You know, is it you understand the principles of the game, or in my world, you know, you can kick a ball 5 meters. You know, what actually constitutes a base might be different, but ultimately, you know, where I come from with my view of coaching, I guess, would be very much from that kind of teaching games for understanding kind of approach. So if the guys and girls listening to this haven't come across TGFU, Teaching Games for Understanding, effectively it was a concept for teaching that was developed in the 80s by a couple of guys at Loughborough University, Rod Thorpe, Len Ormond, Dave Bunker, those guys were involved in it. And principally, it would say, let kids play the game and then understand how to play the game from a tactical perspective. So, for example, if you were learning to play badminton, in order for me to beat you, right, I know the rules, which mean, so to score a point, I've got to get the badminton shuttlecock to hit the floor. So tactically, if I move you to the back, that helps me understand that it's created some space near the front in order for me to then hit the shuttlecock with my next shot into that you might not be able to get to. So by understanding the principle of the game, and we could play that with a balloon or one of those airflow balls that you buy at the beach for 99p that you lose in the wind. You could start to understand the principles of the game. Once you understand the principle, you could then start to help them think about, right, well, if I've got to get the shuttlecock to the back, what's the best way to propel it to get there? I.e., if it's coming down, if I hit it as an overhead clear shot, up high and to the back, that will then create the opportunity to send you to the back, which means the next shot I might be able to hit softer and with a downward trajectory into the space. So actually then you're learning the techniques to solve the problem that the game gives you.
Yeah.
So I think there was a bit of a misconception that TGFU thought that, or people thought that coaching through games meant that you didn't teach technique. And I think that's not correct. So I would very much come from that kind of, look, let kids understand the game. That's why they're there, because they want to play the game, and then help them find solutions to the problems that are posed. What thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm with you actually, and interestingly enough, I was privileged to meet Rod Thorpe a few years ago, and
He's a great guy, isn't he?
He is a great guy, and one of those people as well who's like, he must think I wonder, he must think, should have if he'd had a patent on TGFU, he'd be doing ever so well. But it's not what floated his boat. He just wanted to try and help. I mean, it's fascinating that other countries adopted TGFU far more readily. I mean, we're talking about it now, but GameSense has been, the basis of coach development, coach education in, say, Australia and New Zealand for, a good couple of decades. I mean, interestingly though, I'm not sure how well it's resonated there either, but it's definitely been a concept. I first stumbled across the idea of TGFU through a famous kind of world-beating Australian hockey coach called Rick Charlesworth, who coached the Australian Hockey Roos, the ladies, and they were all conquering for years. Now, admittedly, they also had the Australian Institute system, which was sort of the precursor to our elite sports system, I suppose. We sort of we built on that and made it better, so to speak. But he talked about designer games back then, and that piqued my interest right back then, because I thought there's got to be a better way. To be honest, I was, Kendall McQuaid talked about this in episode 5. He was talking about he was dying inside, and I got a bit. I think I probably went through a bit of that as well. I was like, there's got to be more to it than this. And I remember talking about Ian Renshaw. Again, he's an interesting character. So I, again, very privileged. I was doing a coach development session for a group of regional women's cricket coaches for the ECB. This was a few years ago, and I got there, and I got there a bit early, and Ian Renshaw was on beforehand, and he was doing all of his stuff on constraints-led coaching, because he's like one of the forefathers of what I suppose is an evolution of the teaching games for understanding model, the constraints-led approach. And I listened to him talking about, the approach he takes and the way he goes about it. And I mean, it was really before how long ago was this? Oh, maybe it was 6-7 years ago. It was before I was really into TGFU, games for understanding, that whole thing. But this is the first time I'd really heard about the constraints-led approach. And I remember listening to what he was saying. I was absolutely, kind of awestruck. And then obviously I had to go afterwards with my stuff. Well, fortunately I was able to adapt. Because I ended up just telling stories about how I developed as a kid playing cricket. And actually, without realizing it, I adopted a constraints-led approach as a kid. So, what I did was, I had a little brother, a couple of years younger than me. And of course, we'd go and play in the garden and stuff like that. So we had a game and we'd always find ways to make the game more challenging. And the reason is, you don't want anybody to be in bat too long because it's boring, isn't it? So you want to try and get them out. So we play with a thinner bat. Or we play with a golf ball. We had a game called Golf Ball Nightmare, which was, the reason it was a nightmare was because A, you got out a lot because it's a little ball. B, it could hit you in the shin, which really hurt. And C, we were playing back towards the house. So if you absolutely creamed one, the person bowling had to stop it going through the patio window. We were unsuccessful on one occasion, and that was probably the end of the game. And then also what I used to do is we'd go to the nets, and I'd spend all day long up at the nets at the school. We'd take sandwiches and all that sort of stuff. And I'd got quite good at that point. And, I was obviously a bit better than my younger brother, and he would get bored of fetching the ball and, all that sort of stuff. So in order to encourage him to carry on bowling at me, I'd say, right, I want you to bowl from 16 yards. So it was obviously more of a challenge for me. I would put pound coins on the stumps and say he won them if he knocked any of them over, and I would bat with a stump. And I didn't realise this, and I still do that to this day. If I'm playing cricket, in order to get myself into some nick, bat with a stump, because I know if I'm in good shape, it's because if I can late cut the ball with a stump. And for those people who don't know what a late cut is, it's a particularly deft and skillful shot seen in the world of cricket. And I can do that shot with a stump, I know I'm in really good shape. And it's very similar, I suppose, to the whole Bradman with a golf ball and all those sorts of things. But I didn't realise I was doing that until, I saw Renshaw start to talk about constraint-led approach, because obviously I was manipulating different task constraints and things like that. I was just doing it so that I'd keep my brother bowling at me. But I then translated that, and I told that story to this group of coaches, and then we started exploring, similar approaches to coaching and coach development. And I've followed Renshaw ever since. And he tells an interesting story. You know, you mentioned his son. Do you know? Have you read that article where he talks about the way he used to coach his son in cricket, playing in the backyard, was when you get out. So Renshaw would be bowling at his son. He'd say, "When you get out, it's time to go for a bath." And like there'd be nights when it was like 10:30, and they're still in the garden. And I'm thinking that's actually living and breathing the constraints-led approach right there.
Yeah. Do you think coaching will be further forward in this country, world, planet, if we actually listened and observed some of the principles that the kids came up with themselves rather than think we knew all the answers? Because from what you just kind of described, as kids, is quite advanced coaching that typically when a kid would then go to a formal cricket session at a club, they wouldn't get any of that stuff. You know, it would be one size fits all and probably the antithesis of what you were saying and what we would agree was probably good coaching. Mm.
Well, it's an area actually that I still reflect on and still think that I'm not very good at, which is that sort of, I was talking with Joey Peters from Gameplay Learn earlier on. She'll be on the podcast sometime in the middle of May. And she was talking about self-determination and self-directed learning and getting the kids to actively engage in finding ways of playing. She was actually telling me about a really cool game that she plays called the goalie game, where when you're in your own half, everybody becomes a goalie. They're allowed to pick the ball up. And she said there was a period of time when they were doing this and they were like, but they could only keep the ball for 3 seconds. So then, they could pass it to each other in their own half with their hands instead of with their feet. But then once they went into the attacking half, they all had to go down to the feet again. But what they said was, so she said, right, so how can we, what do we need to do here to kind of, challenge ourselves, or what different rules could we put? And one of the girls said, when you're a goalie, can't you kick the ball from your hands? And she went, yeah, you can. And then they went, right. So that's what they started to do. And that changed the way the game was played. And I thought it was a really nice example, actually, of that kind of how kids will come up with different ideas and different things that we as, we've had all the creativity knocked out of us, haven't we? So actually we ought to be tapping into their creativity because they're going to come up with amazing things that'll probably make games a whole lot better.
Oh, absolutely. I think that goes back to what we were saying about that kind of definition of coaching at the start. And it's about you and you deliver your session plan and the kids get whatever they were going to get done to them. I can remember my own example from that. I was in Dubai. A mate of mine who used to coach with set up a coaching company over there. And I went over to do a few days work with him / holiday. It was an indoor session at school. I can still remember the kid, Charlie. He was 8 years old. We were playing a game and there was 3 groups of 5 or 6 kids in each. 2 groups had a ball between them. So there's 1 ball in Group A, 1 ball in Group B. Group C were then the defenders, but they could run around and try and get the ball from either group and then had to try and keep one of the balls if they got it. But if they got 2 at the same time, then they've got to find a way to keep 2 balls. Game going on. So Group A look after yours, Group B look after yours, Group C go and get one. I can remember the game going on, all planned out, progressions, all good. And then Charlie come up to me during the session and said, it was in Group A. He said, if I see Group B are in trouble and need some help, can I go and help them as well as trying to help my own team? And I'm like, man, that's way better than where I was going to take it. Like, let's go with that idea. Stop what we're doing, stop what we're doing. Charlie, tell everybody that, because that's awesome. Right, brilliant, let's play Charlie's game because it's better than mine. and the kids went off and played, but the adaptation that he brought to the game brought way more kind of scanning and observation skills as beyond what I would have probably challenged the kids with. So yeah, if he decides to be a coach, he's going to be a great coach because he'll have way better ideas than probably some of us do.
I mean, the way I think about this, I've talked about this before, but I think the video games industry, who I think we are competing against for children's attention. I mean, and my little boy is, he does love his sport, and he does love to go out and play cricket in the garden and whatever, football, or we just go and play whatever. He loves that, but he also does love to sit in front of a screen and get absorbed in worlds and stuff like that. But video game designers are very good at this, I think, because if they don't make their games engaging and have just enough challenge to still be reachable, and yet, but also not too easy, then people don't buy their games or play their games, and they don't make any money. Yeah. So they're really motivated by this. But what's interesting in our context is we almost feel, as a coaching industry, I'm generalizing obviously, but I still feel like this, is that we know best, and children need to come and do what we say they need to do. And if they don't like it, well, that's just the way of the world. And I don't think that's an appropriate way for us to think about the sports experience.
No, absolutely. I reckon there's some amazing principles from gaming that we can take into our world. Because again, it's one of those things that, it captures the imagination of the kids. And if you said that kind of pitching it at the right level kind of thing, and they go back, they get another go, they go back, they get no, right, I've beaten the baddie on this one, I go on to the next level. And again, I remember doing a session with the kids at the club once, and I kind of said to them, right, we're starting at level 1, and we're going to work through to get to level 7. What's level 7? Oh, I don't think, you're not ready for level 7 yet, we can't talk about that. You haven't even got past level 1 yet. And we kind of built it up from like 8v2, 7v3, it was a big gridded area, so there's like 16 grids, and we'd go down to 12 grids, and we'd change the numbers, and it got to the stage where, the outcome of the game, to score a point, you had to receive the ball in a square on your own. Yeah. So there was lots of scanning and movement and recognizing where the space was, but it got to the stage where, right, we've gone through level 4, level 5, I'm not sure level 5 was really, I'm not sure it's there yet. Well, what do we need to do? Well, I don't know. You tell me. Like, how can you score more points? Right, let's go and do this. Right, go on, go and show me. Go and have a go. Right, I think we're ready for level 6. Yeah, let's get it. Level 6. Boys, we're never going to get level 7. we're going to. We need to. I know we need to, but how are you going to do it? Right, now we've got 16 players and we've got 12 squares. This is going to be hard. So you're managing their expectations, but you're building and scaffolding that challenge at the same time. Yeah. And that, I think, is a principle of what computer games do.
Totally.
But I think it's a neat concept that we can nick some really good ideas from. Although, have you ever seen a kid play Minecraft?
Yeah, Evan loves Minecraft.
Like, don't take anything from Minecraft, because Minecraft is just ridiculous. There's no purpose whatsoever. Zero.
Well, there is.
Pick your game, obviously. Pick your game.
It's digital Lego. So actually, what I like about Minecraft is they create their own world, they create their own rules.
Yeah. I guess there's principles that you can take from that.
Yeah. But it's not the same.
There's no purpose.
To be honest, it took me a long time to work it out. And then when Evan came along and he said, look at the pirate ship I've built. And it was fantastic. I mean, you could go inside it. It was a proper Spanish galleon. And you could go inside it, and there was gold treasure, and there was everything everywhere. I mean, how the hell have you done that? And then he said, and look where I've put it. And he put it on the top of a skyscraper, something like that, But that was fine. That was his world.
Maybe I spent time with my nephew, who was probably 5 at the time.
Yeah.
Who built a pen and put some sheep in it. So Michael, well, why? What's it for? Well, it's not for anything.
When you get into the real depths of it, though, there's actual proper engagement with other people and games and stuff. It's actually a proper immersive experience and all those sorts of things.
And that's perhaps the lessons of that kind of thing that I need to take from it from myself. Really is that kind of thing of, well, there hasn't got to be a purpose for what he's doing, but he's immersed in a different world that creates different ideas and lets his imagination and creativity flourish.
I think that's where, and that goes back to what you said, the question you asked around, can we learn more? And so one of the things I took away from the conversation I had with Kendall was he whether he knew it or not, his whole philosophy is he wants the individual he's coaching to become immersed in the process of learning. So they're totally aware and in tune and are completely absorbed in how they are moving their body in order to propel a ball a certain distance in a certain direction into the distance. And I see that. I mean, sometimes, you know, I say I'll call Evan. I'll be like, Evan, because he's just immersed. He's totally absorbed by it. And I would love to get to a scenario where I could honestly, hand in heart, think I've created an environment where kids are that immersed. I reckon I've done it. I've done it a few times, definitely. Well, more than a few times. But it's.
So what does that look like? Tell us a bit more about how does that kind of look, think, smell, feel. What was the kind of things that you did to create that environment?
Well, ironically, it was a moment when I was working with a talent group, and I did a session where we played one game. And I changed the objective of the game slightly. So there were 3 areas that you had to try and carry the ball through in order to score a point, to score points. And in the initial stages, there was the wide areas, you scored 3 points, and the middle area you only scored 1. The thinking being that, you know, we wanted to try and use or explore width as a means to score. And I did this with this group of pretty high level 16 to 18 year olds, and I asked one question over and over again, which was, what is the game asking you to do? And I had in inverted commas, I had a coach developer there who was essentially giving me some feedback, and I got some, you know, interesting feedback subsequently. I won't go into that, and so they'd come in and they'd go, and I'd say, so what's this game asking you to do? And they would give me all these different, they give me the usual platitudes of communicate. Yes, well, what does that mean? And they couldn't really give me a concrete answer. And I'd say, but what's the game asking you to do? And they'd say, it's asking us to dribble, carry to space, all the things they'd heard us say. And what they're doing at that point is they're doing what I call the questioning guessing game, which is, I'm thinking of something, and there's a right answer, and you'll basically you say things, and one of you will stumble across it, and I will congratulate you for stumbling across it, which is how a lot of coaches do questioning, but that's for another day. I wasn't asking that. I wasn't thinking, there wasn't necessarily a right answer. I was just asking them what they thought the game was asking them to do. And they weren't able to articulate because they weren't thinking about, they weren't aware of it. So what I then said, I said, well, tell you what then, I don't want you to answer the question. I want you to go into the game, and I want you, next time we come out, I want you to tell me what you're aware of, what you observe, or what you sense. So they went into it and they're playing, and it wasn't very good. You know, the game itself wasn't there was a lot of error. There was quite a lot of disengagement, what seemed to be like disengagement, people not necessarily playing with intensity and focus, which is what we normally ask for at those levels. But I wasn't focused on that at the time, because I was focused on them, their awareness of what the game is, what their tactical awareness of what the game was asking them to do. They came in again, and what's the game asking you to do? And still again, not really getting this sort of information. Well, it wasn't even that. I said, what do you observe now? What are you asking? What do you observe about the game, or what do you sense by the game? Still not really tuned into their awareness. Kept going. And by the end of it, all right, and this was an hour, right, a whole hour on this one thing, right. By the end of it, they were flying. They'd absolutely cracked the concept. The ball was flying everywhere. They'd really bought into the idea of how they found space, how they used space, everything else. And by the end of it, I said, so what did you observe? And they'd got there. Now, for me, I was in flow as a coach. I was just completely immersed in helping them engage through this process. I wasn't prepared to give them the answer. I felt as soon as I did that, they would think, it was like, they think they'd get away with it, so I thought, no, you're going to struggle through this. And, Dave Allred, Johnny Wilkinson's coach, quote that stays in my mind, learning happens in the ugly zone. That was the ugly zone right there. And I wouldn't let them come out of it. They had to grab and scrape to come out of it. And for me, that's as close to a flow experience as I've had in coaching. Idea that was postulated by a guy called, I'll try to say his name, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. A good book on this, The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler, who talks about flow. The idea of a flow state being, that kind of when you're in the zone, when everything just clicks and it's almost effortless, and all sense of space and time seems to disappear, and you're just in that moment, completely absorbed by it. Yeah, and so, it was a great moment for me as a coach, but I like to think it was it may have been frustrating for them, but they were certainly absorbed. They weren't intense, but they were, I think that was partially because they were scratching their heads, not physically, but you know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was why I kept asking that question, because what I was trying to get information on was what did they notice? And it's a question I ask an awful lot nowadays is, what do you notice? Or what do you observe? And actually, generally, what do you notice? Because, I don't necessarily want them to, it's not necessarily observing with their eyes. It could be all forms of sensation. So it's, so it was one of those where I kept going back to that same question, because I would only be satisfied that they'd actually learned if they could articulate, effectively what they notice, because a lot of them just play. They're not aware. They have no sense of awareness. They have no sense of what's going on around them. They just do stuff. And
how do you then compare that to somebody that might play on instinct? So some elite performers. So if you took someone like Paul Gascoigne or maybe someone like Wayne Rooney, they might not be able to articulate what it is that they do or what they notice. But man, they can do it well.
But they surely they can tell you something about what they notice.
Well, I don't know. It's It's an interesting one, I think.
Well, and then again, okay. So the other way they can show me, by the way, is they don't have to tell me. They can show me, because by the end of the game, they're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if they're doing that consistently over time, that shows progression and continuity, which would be learning.
Yeah, and you're right. Not everybody can verbally describe what's happening and what have you. But what I'm interested in is what's happening to them, what they feel, as much as what they see, as much as what they hear. Because I want them to tap into, I want them to become more aware of those things, so that they become more aware of what's happening. Because what you might call the on instinct player. Actually, in many ways, that's the sort of player we're looking for, because you're looking for a totally adaptable player.
Yeah. But
in order to create decision makers, you want players who are doing those things on instinct because of the cues they're getting from around them.
Yeah.
Now, I think more often than not, what you have is players who can solve the immediate problem right in front of them, i.e., whatever that individual opponent is providing. But what they can't solve is that problem in relation to the other information beyond them.
Yeah.
So the solution they choose seems like the right solution at that time, and then we all on the sidelines scream and shout, why did you possibly... Because we can see the bigger picture. We want them to choose the solution based on what they can see beyond that immediate opponent.
Yeah, which I guess, I think there's two things really that link into the conversation that you just highlighted really neatly there. Is one, that whole kind of technique to the point of repetition. Kind of pointless if they can't solve the problem and apply that in the context that they need it. So they might have got a really good technique that they've practiced a lot, but if the opponent directly that's causing them problems doesn't allow that, how do they adapt that technique appropriately? But also, I think that question about noticing is a really good one, because it links to what we said earlier about coaching and the relationships and understanding people, because you can ask that question, but actually the answer that you get from a particular individual player, child or adult, I think that's a great question to work with adults as well, that the answer that they give tells you a lot about where they're at as an individual.
Yeah.
And I think too often, we breeze over the answer that they give because we've asked the question, therefore, right, that's it done. or we're looking for the right answer, so we move on to the next kid and hope that that next player gives us the right answer.
Yeah.
But actually, the answer that the kid gives, even if it's wrong, that says where that player is at.
Yeah.
And actually, we should be able to then take on board that information, reflect, and then we'll try and work out strategies to help that kid notice some other stuff if what they're noticing at the moment isn't the complete picture of things.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's genuinely amazing to me. I said, what do you notice? There's no wrong answer to that. What do you notice? And the amount of kids who either go, I don't know, or they'll say something that they think you want to hear. And I think a lot of that is stemming from the fact that, you know, I've been reading a lot about didactic questioning, which is, you know, coaches think, oh, I'm using questions. So I'm a good coach because I'm using questions. But actually, what they're doing is they're basically telling people what to do through a question by saying there's a right answer to this question, and I'm going to see who's got it.
Yeah.
And that whole idea of a what they call a convergent question, which comes to a point, you know, a right answer, and challenging ourselves to ask more divergent questions where there isn't really a right answer. And what we're trying to use, so instead of using questions to impart a right answer, what we do is we use questions to find out what information the players are picking up, and then maybe we can start to direct their attention towards things that we consider to be important in the game context of whatever we're trying to achieve. Which is, again, that involves them in the learning process far more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we definitely haven't covered what we meant to talk about, but then, like, you know, I suppose.
But this was
well, knowing that I know that so many coaches are struggling with the parental challenge, I still think we need to come back to that at some point. We would be doing them a disservice if we didn't. However, I have very much enjoyed this conversation, as I always do.
And I think this will probably be the start of part 2 and part 3 on this topic as well, probably. Because I think, again, it's one that could go in a variety of different directions and continue to be off-piste in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, and the danger is with these conversations as well is that we know there's a lot of discussion to be had in these areas, and we tend to gloss over them for the limits of time. So let's go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, on occasions. And if we really end up getting into the weeds, I still think there's value in that.
Yeah, without doubt. Although I don't understand any of that analogy, but yeah, let's do that.
Not for the first time.
No, maybe that's
Right, well, as usual, I really appreciate your time. You got anything interesting coming out on Rivers of Thinking?
riversofThinking.com is the blog that I do. No, I haven't posted for a couple of weeks now, so I will. No doubt there will be something that has sparked some interest that I will have a ramble about at some stage. But watch this space. I'm sure there will be something coming very soon. Awesome. I haven't blogged for ages because I've been too busy posting ramblings as I walk to work. So it's about time I did something in the written form as well. Yeah, well, but it's conversations like this that always add a variety of different things to the discussions. And even if it's only ever my dad that listens to this and he goes, "Oh, that was interesting," then it's probably been worthwhile. It actually fascinates me, if I'm honest. It's always fascinating. The people who have actually listened to this stuff always makes me interested. But I think there's a genuine appetite out there, and I think there's a dearth of information, and people are looking for it. So we'll continue to do it. Yeah, I think if we can, from working in the sport on a daily kind of basis, really kind of decipher some of the theory and bits and pieces that are out there and look at that in an applied setting, that actually might make a difference to the mum or dad coach that has to work with kids, or, a coach that works in a talent pathway that might be a bit more serious about their coaching in a different way. If we can kind of distill some of that into a practical, applied sense through some of our experiences as well, then hopefully there might be a bit of value in them. Cool. Amen to that. Have a great weekend. Yep, you too, pal. See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.